know my experience for why you're all here is because you would like for us to prepare you for the endless number and for you to deal flawlessly and perfectly on the endless number of complex and complicated, inherently challenging issues that you deal with as commissioners, right? If that's your expectation, well, then we're just about done here. So we just wrap it up now. But my experience is that you all will do just fine. I know some of you have been commissioners for a long time, some of you are fairly new. But there are a lot of big, scary, very inherently difficult issues that you deal with. But again, I think you stay engaged, you continue to avail yourself of these kind of resources, and you're going to do just fine. The trap is as is the case in life, is when you think you got it figured out. You think you can handle it on your own, because that's when you're toast. Because the issues that we deal with, it's very difficult for us to handle on our own. And way up there at the top of those really difficult, really important issues is public safety. So I practice what I preach. So even in here today, I can't do it alone. I've got my Deputy County Administrator, Alan Rosenzweig, who's Nick sort of introduced here a minute ago. And Alan is one of the really best minds in county government. He's got 25 years in where he's one of the best financial minds in county government, having run the budget offices in Sarasota and Pinellas County prior to coming on with Leon County about 15 years ago. And that's in lieu of a raise, okay? But he is, so you might wonder what's the financial guy, what's the money guy doing in a public safety presentation? Well, it's pretty easy. In fact, given that this is your biggest expenditure of dollars, it also oftentimes is your biggest budgetary challenge, and it's your also represents some of your greatest financial exposure. And so, you know, while neither one of us are cops, and neither one of us consider ourselves necessarily public safety experts, there may be a few things that we consider ourselves experts in. We're expert in this. We know this one thing, which is if you don't get this right, it doesn't matter what you're an expert, what you consider yourself an expert in. Because if you don't get this right, nothing else matters. Now I get caught up like anybody else. Andy, you can go to the next slide in all the different things we do, and I know Rod just did A to Z, airports to zoos. I get as caught up as anyone else in all the different things we do and all the headlines, and I chase all the best of awards like anybody else in here. And it's kind of easy to get caught up in the broad range of things we do. But as I mentioned, if you don't get this right, nothing else matters. This was a headline that we received, a dubious headline that we received in 2011 in our community. And so it's not the one that you want to see. Because again, immediately once you receive this headline, trust me, that it doesn't matter if in the same year you are recognized as having the best parks and recreation program in the world or the best libraries in the universe. This headline kind of erases all that, because when the public perceives them and their family and their friends as being in any way in more danger as a result of the action or inaction of the county commission, then you got a big problem. And again, I know the sheriff's relationship in our structure of government is important, but it's you guys, you can't hide when it comes down to these public safety issues. So we've got a lot to cover. We're going to cover them really, really quickly. So if you could just jot down questions that you might have, hold on to them, because Alan and I are going to try to quickly get to that point, because really the conversation, the back and forth is where the really good stuff happens. So we're going to try to hit just the high points, and as you can see from all that we have up there, we're going to be moving pretty quick. But what I wanted to do is, you'll see from the icons there, the best practice icon and the on your radar icon, we want you to get really something out of this time that we have together. So we've identified what we consider really best practices in these areas. So you kind of take that with you. And also on your radar is just, hey, something might be really hot right now that's coming down the pike, and you might want to just keep it on your radar. So that's what we're doing there. So with that, Alan, I think I hand it off to you, don't I?
Yep, and I'm not as confident as Vince with his notes, so I'm going to stay glued to the table.
Okay.
So the big question is, the guy who learned all his law enforcement from Andy Griffin. That's me. That was a joke. Wow. All right, so let's try that again. So the guy who learned all his law enforcement from Andy Griffin.
That's good.
There we go. I like the laugh track. All right, why am I here? Because it's really basic, because public safety is where you spend the most of your money. And what we're going to find out today is a lot of it is not directly in your control either. And that is part of the balancing act you're going to hear about today. So it presents some of our toughest budget challenges. And what we're going to show you on the slide in quick 3 slides here, it just doesn't matter. In Leon County, for example, you can see public safety, biggest chunk of our budget. We look at Clay County, again, smaller county, biggest chunk of their budget. We go to a larger county, Orange County, again, largest chunk of your budget. So when you look at it in aggregate across them, the only thing that really changes is the decimal point. It really doesn't matter if you're a big, small, or medium county. Ultimately, public safety is the biggest piece of your budget. And as we drill through this, you're going to see a lot of it is going to be part of that sheriff's budget. So the first thing we want to just hit on real quickly is our relationship with the sheriff office, which we like to call a love affair, which hopefully you all do too. And it's more, in our minds, more like an arranged marriage. Again, this is humor, everybody. Whoa, this is going to be rough, Vince. Anyway, so like a good arranged marriage, this is going to cost you as you go through it. And that will be the biggest understatement we make up here all day. It is going to cost you, but we think in a decent relationship, that's okay. And before I drill into a lot of the detail, I'm going to have Mr. Long walk you through the speed dating version of the complex relationship we have with the sheriff. And it's going to take you all the way back to the beginning of time.
Yes, that's where it starts. Can you guys hear okay, by the way? Okay, good. Well, yeah, buckle up for a really quick, mostly accurate history lesson on the sheriff here. And again, as Alan said, this is important. It's really kind of important to just get this basic relationship. And I know we kind of know it, but really the historical roots of it are pretty important, and you may be surprised at how little it's changed over time. So sheriffs can date their structure all the way back to medieval Europe, where the sheriff was really the center of government. It explains a lot, doesn't it? The ego, like I said, some things have never changed, right? And so even the word sheriff, you've got it there, was the shire reeve. He was appointed by the king to keep peace in the hinterlands. Think about Robin Hood, right? And the Nottingham. And so he was appointed by the king to keep the peace in the hinterlands and collect taxes. Pretty effective way of collecting taxes, probably, right? If you go all the way back to the what's considered the original Florida Constitution, 1868 Constitution, that established the sheriff and county commissioners as independent constitutional officers in their own right. Prior to that time, in even territorial Florida, there were 2 elected officials or local officials, if you will. Even prior to them being elected, they were appointed by the governor, and the 2 were the sheriff and a justice of the peace at the time. Again, fast forward to 1868, you have that Constitution reflects a sheriff as an independent constitutional officer, as well as the Board of County Commissioners as constitutional officers. And that's, again, where you get the term constitutional officers from that 1868 Constitution. Now, fast forward 100 years, a lot had changed, obviously, in Florida. But rather than engage in wholesale, comprehensive local government reform to reflect how Florida had changed from a very rural, sparsely populated state to what the state had become in 1968, rather than engage in that to reflect the changes in the structure of government, the Florida legislature decided they would punt. Imagine that, right? And even some things never change. And in 1968, what they said, rather than engage again in wholesale, comprehensive local government reform, they said that they would allow, they did 2 things actually. They granted counties all home rule authority, and I know you all are familiar with that, and they granted them the ability to establish a county charter. Now, just show of hands, who's in a charter county in here? We got a few. So they established that ability to create a charter. And in that charter, obviously, you can sort of take home rule to the next level in that you all can determine, much like cities do, that you all can determine your structure of government, how you want to be organized, your powers, how you tax, a lot of different things outside that original 1868 Florida Constitution. But that power to customize your county government and make big changes extends to the constitutional officers. And you can do that. You can change their elected status. You can change what powers and authority that they have, as long as that you still, as the county commission, provide for their statutory responsibilities. So I say that to say this: not a lot of counties do it, and some counties have done it in the past. Some have bounced back to a more non-charter or a constitutional form of government relative to their sheriff. Now, I will say, sometimes I get in trouble. Sometimes I have prior sheriffs or previous constitutional officers in the room. Do I have any? That's great. Now I can really let it loose in here. But again, your authority extends to changes that you can make there. Now, not many people do it. Not many charter counties do it. And it really has less to do with practicality and more to do with history, more to do with politics than it does practicality. Because again, I can be pretty provocative on this subject, and Alan and I have taught many years at Florida State in the MPA program and really get people worked up on this issue. But the constitutionals that we know of, probably, I would, if I had to guess, probably wouldn't be or won't in the long term in Florida continue to be independent elected officers, because they have no policy power. They have no taxing authority. They have none of the reasons why you would elect your county commissioner. They're providing an administrative function for the most part. The tax collector is doing something not unlike the bill collecting department at Sears is doing. The property appraiser's office, people go to school now to become property appraisers. It's not a policy function, but not many people change it, and we understand that. People like to elect their sheriff, they like that accountability, we get it. But given that not many people change that structure, and that most charters today have a provision which is called a preservation of constitutional officers section, given that relationship, cooperation is key, right? Given the fact that they don't work for me and they don't work for you, that cooperation is key. And that cooperation really ensures a harmonious relationship, and I'll say that cooperation doesn't just happen because you've got an inherent conflict built into that relationship. You want to talk about that?
Sure, yeah, and as we build on that, the inherent conflict, and you all know it, we'll just say it. The inherent conflict is you have a sheriff's office that requires an inordinate amount of money to do what they need to do, public safety, and your citizens really like that. And you, as the Board of County Commissioners, on the other hand, have the other side of that. You have the unfortunate task of having to levy the taxes, which people generally don't like. There is your inherent conflict in that relationship. And that's why the relationship is so challenging, because under Florida law, the sheriff comes along, presents you a budget with the other constitutional officers. Up to a few years ago, he just had to give you 3 lines. Recently, the law changed, and they do have to give you a little more detail now on their budget as prescribed by the board. And you can require them to submit their budget May 1st, and you can make them follow your budget process a little more closely. But ultimately, the sheriff, like some of the other constitutionals, and we won't get into those today, has the ability to appeal their budget. And they have the right to go to the cabinet, the administrative commission, basically, and say, you, the county commission, didn't fund me correctly. I need more money. And we've got a couple examples. On anybody from Pasco County in here today? Nobody? Pasco, going once, going twice? All right, so Pasco, several years ago, the sheriff appealed their budget to the cabinet. He went and said, he asked for $4.5 million more, about 5% of the total request, to the governor and cabinet, and the cabinet ultimately turned around and said, yeah, they gave him 1%, they gave about $1 million more. And if we look at another one in Alachua County, anybody in Alachua here today? Alachua, the sheriff is appealing the budget right now to the cabinet, is our understanding from what we're reading in the paper. And they're appealing over even a smaller amount of money, $935,000. And the board's pretty much said, yeah, and the boards even said, no, We're not, and they're fighting it very directly and with very good facts. Their county attorneys drafted a pretty strong memorandum back to the cabinet saying no, there's decreasing crime, we have the right per capita funding, but ultimately the sheriffs use this as a threat. And what we're trying to explain here today is this really what you want ultimately? Do you want to have that relationship where they're going to use this threat of an appeal to the cabinet over and over and over again? So what we've identified is what we think is a best practice, which is to develop, and we'll read it, a mutually beneficial budget process for you and your sheriff. Because we know sheriffs generally aren't coming from running big CEOs of corporations. They don't run multi-million-dollar organizations that get elected. We have the administrative capacity. So as you see here, and you probably can't read it all, but there's a letter we have from our sheriff this year to the county administrator basically saying, I want to work with your staff in doing a salary study. And we'll agree in the end to come back to the board with a plan, because we all realize they needed raises, but our staff, their staff cooperatively did a salary study for the deputies, determined a way to phase it in over 3 or 4 years. We brought it back to the board, funded it through the budget, everybody's happy, and the sheriff submitted in his budget, and all because we worked together, and there was a lot of mutual respect and trust on both sides of the equation. So again, that relationship's extremely important.
For many years now, and just to jump in,
Yeah.
Alan, for many years now, and Alan and I will be pretty informal up here, the sheriff has just voluntarily participated in our budget process really like any other county department. So he goes through the entire part, doesn't have to do all the things that we do, but he sees, and this is the key, she's got to see the benefit of it. And that's something that we work with them every day, and Alan works with their CFO every day to ensure that they see the mutual benefit of that relationship, or else they'll decide not to play that way.
Yeah. And you'll see why as we go to right here. How does the sheriff get funded? Again, about half your property tax, as you saw on those first 3 slides from the general size of the counties, goes to fund your sheriff, a jail, and law enforcement. And in Leon County, the number's right in there. And in some jurisdictions, you may elect to fund it through an MSTU, a Municipal Services Taxing Unit, a dedicated property tax to fund some portion of the sheriff's budget. Typically, an MSTU, and we have it in 9 counties in the state right now.
Anybody in here?
Anybody on
using
MSTU?
to do?
A portion of it?
Okay.
Yeah, so in an MSTU, in the unincorporated area of your county, you may have a dedicated millage rate, typically to fund the road patrol portion of the sheriff's budget. Obviously, the jail's a countywide function, you use countywide property taxes for that, but in an MSTU, you're trying to dedicate the funding to line up with a specific service. But even in that, there's some interesting stories in the state. Again, we go back to Alachua County several years ago. The sheriff sued the county and said he didn't want to be funded by an MSTU any longer. The city of Gainesville had been annexing a good portion of the unincorporated area. Therefore, the millage rate would have to keep going up to fund the sheriff. The sheriff wasn't real excited about being hung out on the tax bill as a reason why you have to fund it. He wanted to argue that his services were completely countywide and he should be funded from just the countywide property tax rate, which is a legitimate argument. But the board has the discretion of saying, no, we want an MSTU, and the court sided with the county commission and said, no, you can continue to fund that sheriff's unincorporated rural patrol with an MSTU. So the precedent had been set there. Pinellas County uses it, and about 1/3 of the sheriff's budget is funded through that MSTU in Pinellas County. So that briefly touches on funding and law enforcement. And now, Mr. Long will talk to you about something he has just a little bit of experience with.
The county jail.
There you go.
And again, on this stuff, we'll come back to all this. You guys, if you want to dig in deeper on some of these budgetary issues, we'll come back. But let me hit the jail real quick. There's several ways that we provide for the jail function, but ultimately, next slide please, it's a responsibility of the county commission. And not, the public doesn't always see that. They associate it oftentimes with the sheriff's department. You've got 7, I think 8, as I just looked at that list, that if you got to add Escambia to that list, that operate their jails as a department of the county government. You've got a big chunk of them, again, who sort of delegate that responsibility to the sheriff's department. And Citrus County, my home county, that's right, they still privatize, yes? Okay, so you got that. So we'll talk to those guys about how that's working out. But let me ask you this question. I mean, talk about things that are on your radar. Can the sheriff refuse to run the jail? That's an interesting question. I mean, I think from the beginning of time, the sheriff has threatened to not run the jail. And in fact, just recently in Okeechobee County, anybody from Okeechobee County? There we go. Boy, he could, maybe we'll, I'll get through this quick and we'll get the real stuff, from Commissioner here, but he threatened, he went probably as far as anyone has in recent history in saying, hey, you guys can run this thing. And, ultimately, the courts didn't dispose of this question, which I was kind of waiting for, because as I said, it's been a question since, the beginning of time, and whether or not he could, again, refuse that responsibility. Ultimately, they said, we're gonna come back to you when we break and get the real stuff on that. Alan, are you up?
Yes, I am. So I'm going to walk through quickly about 3 or 4 different areas in terms of things that go on in the jail and ways that you may want to reduce that jail population. And again, it's in the county's best interest, obviously, to look at all these examples, because ultimately this is going to reduce your costs, because it's going to prevent you from having to build more jail space. So the Public Safety Coordinating Councils, quickly, they're mandated by state law. You should all have one in your county. If you don't, it's something that definitely want to make sure it gets formed. It's set up, it's got a bunch of stakeholders in it, state attorney, public defender, your judges, your correctional officers. Everybody sits around a table, and their whole idea is to figure out how to make sure that we maintain and are properly utilizing the capacities at the jail. Originally, you'll see the term up there, it was called the pity committee. A lot of people thought it was the intent to try to get people out of jail. Absolutely not. The intent is it's an effective tool to make sure that the right people are in jail. But at the same time, offenders that don't need to be in jail shouldn't be using precious bed space. And if you don't get that right, all you're going to be doing is building more jails. And it's just going to cost you money. So what do we do to manage the population? We're going to give you some best practices here. Obviously, in Leon County, we use everything. We use everything you see on the board up there: probation, community service, work camp, work programs, GPS, drug courts, and a dozen more. And we've had a jail built for 15 years now, and we have managed that population within the capacity of that jail, and we keep looking for new best practices all the time. One thing we did several years ago, we put in place a detention review coordinator.
This is a biggie.
This is something we created. It's housed in court administration. The board funds it. Costs about $70,000 a year, but that person's job is every day to wake up and figure out who doesn't belong in jail and why. And we're not saying just get people out because, oh, we're trying to reduce the population. They go through the files, they analyze it, they work in court administration, they look who's coming through the courts, they look at, are people not getting the right programs, and are there opportunities to get them out? So we fund it, the person works in the court system, they report to the court administrator directly.
We thought that was important when we did this. We said, this could be a person that works for me, it could be a person that works for the under the board. But we said, let's not have those, let's have them work directly for the judiciary. We'll fund it. You all, as long as their job is, and they have complete access to everything, their job is to get up every morning and see who got put in jail last night and see if they belong there, we're in. So as Alan said, this is a position that cost us less than 70 grand, and you can see the cost avoidance just in the last year.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you want to talk about return on investment. I mean, if we're looking at a private sector opportunity or 70 for 2.6 million, we'd fund it every day. And then another issue we're going to bring up here is, it deserves a slide, obviously on its own, is your medical costs at the jail. Again, a huge cost. As you can see in Leon County, 1 out of every $5 you spend at the jail, medical costs. We've seen a best practice going on here, and we're going to talk about that at the bottom, but generally, contracting out of the medical is probably a good decision. Our sheriff does it. He bids it out periodically, gets some competition in there, but there's a lot of high medical malpractice costs that they umbrella cover. Retaining doctors and nurses is a big issue. Obviously, not a lot of people want to do that, but when you have the private sector involved, they have a formula for getting that done, and the economies of scale are just there. It's a lot easier for them to ramp up big systems as opposed to just kind of for you to run up and run a little clinic out of your own jail. A best practice that we've identified is a catastrophic insurance policy that heads the exposure from expensive procedures. It's well worth buying a big policy to cover you. In Flagler County several years ago, they had one medical case that ate up a quarter of their budget just for one individual inmate, gone for the whole year, and that comes very difficult.
It could, I mean, you don't want to, I don't want to sensationalize it, but it falls in the category of the potential to bankrupt a county is some of these.
Especially a small county.
Yeah, especially a small county. These, one major heart transplant or whatever you're talking about can do it. So, sometimes I don't even want to ask in this room if people knew that. Do they have a catastrophic insurance policy on this? It is one of those things, as a county commissioner, you can just make sure either the jail or the private company or or yourself, as if you're running it into your shop, that you make sure that you have one.
Yeah, it's not an option just to put the guy out on the street when you got to have a medical issue. You just got to deal with it. And
We've
something-
tried.
Yeah, we've tried everything. So to put on put on your radar down here, federal legislation we've been advocating for, and if your delegation's not aware of it, we think continue to have Medicaid coverage in the predisposition of inmates is very important. That's revenue that can come back to the counties. We're still pushing for that, so we definitely think it's something that if back in your jurisdiction, if you have lobbyists or legislatures you want to talk to, that we all should be on the same page on that. In the area of medical, we have mental issues in the jail, and the estimates nationwide, 60% of the jail population is mentally ill, and we got a few statistics up there. They stay in jail 8 times longer, and they cost 7 times more to deal with. The psychotropic drugs and all the issues that go along with somebody who's in there with a mental issue. The largest mental institution in the country, Cook County, Illinois Jail. It's that basic. Inmates are that population. Bringing down another best practice, at the same time we did detention review coordinator, we created a mental health coordinator. Same concept, small investment. We've housed in court administration. This person's job is to work and manage the mental health population in the jail. Figure out what other treatments they need. Are they in the right facility? Should they be moved somewhere else into maybe a mental health institution if there's one available, or is there a bed available? Again, our investment here, the numbers are on the screen, but we've diverted 24,000 bed nights in our jail through this position alone annually. Again, about a $70,000 to $80,000 investment, but a huge, huge cost savings to the county.
If you got a smaller jail, it's conceivable that you could have one person do both.
Yeah, but it's a great investment. You're all very familiar with this term by now, every county probably. Juvenile justice. Historically, it's the responsibility of the state. Several years back in 2004, the legislature decided, no, here's where we're going to cost shift money. We sent it to the counties. If you're a fiscally constrained county, and some of you in here may be, this doesn't really impact you as much, but we basically, as counties, went from paying 0 to 60% of the program cost here, and we all absorbed it. Kudos to FACT, the first year, they did fight it legally, and we did delay it for 1 year in the courts because it was imposed improperly, so we did save some money 1 year, but then ultimately in 2004 it did become our problem. The last thing to put on your radar in here is FACT is still trying to advocate and get this fixed. We're at the 57-43 number still right now, and it's all a big cleanup mess at the end of the year, but they're still trying to push for 50-50 if they can get it done. And I'll send this back now to Mr. Long.
Shifting gears, EMS, very quickly. This slide indicates something that you can expect if you run EMS. That's cute, isn't it? See what we did there? Here, we'll back that up. No, we won't do that again. But that's actually that comes from an email that was sent to me years ago when we were thinking of taking EMS in-house. And I contacted a friend of mine who runs the LA County Fire and EMS department, and I said, hey, I need you. We don't know what we're doing here. We're going to try to figure it out. Can you give me some help on EMS? And he just send me some resources. And he sent me the cutest email, which was that right there, and said, good luck. But I got to tell you, I'll tell you a little quick story. About 12 years ago, we received a call from the CEO of the hospital. And I remember the call very well. It went something like this. Hey, Vince, I was the deputy county administrator at the time. You all are probably going to want to be at a press conference later today. Why is that, CEO of the hospital? Well, because we're not doing EMS any longer, and it's your problem now. And so we're going to make that announcement today. Counties are authorized, but not required, to provide EMS. So there are a lot of choices, a lot of models that are out there, but ultimately the Board of County Commissioners decided, because of the importance of this service, because of the ability to ensure accountability and the quality of service provided, that ultimately this would become a county service. And like I said, there are a few models that are out there for providing this service. You've got county-operated models like us, you've got private models, you've got fire-based models, you've got hospital models, public utility models, intergovernmental nonprofit models. Ultimately, when you break it all down, it falls into 54% fire model or 45% non-fire model. Again, we'll come back to those with some questions. Let me break down just a little bit of the basics here. Again, and I know as I read the statewide news and that sort of thing, I know that lots of counties wrestle with the EMS a lot, and hopefully we can get into some good questions and answers on this. But basically what state law requires is that if you're going to provide BLS, That's basic life support. All you gotta have is 2 EMTs on the truck. If you're gonna do ALS, you gotta have 1 paramedic and 1 EMT. ALS, advanced life support, that involves more involved stuff, including intubation and that sort of thing. So, and advanced medical protocols. That requires, again, EMT and a paramedic. Next up. Response times. Obviously, response times are really important. This, I can tell you, and I can say it here because I'm not in Leon County right now, but of all the things that I'm proud of that we do, you know, I have to love them all equally, but this is, EMS is something that I'm just exceedingly proud of. As I mentioned, we didn't have a lot of experience in EMS. In fact, we had none. And but what we are used to taking on big problems, big issues, and solving them and structuring them properly. We had an opportunity here to structure an EMS service that was a little different. And what we did was and you know, sometimes, you know, private model stuff applies and sometimes it doesn't. But here what we wound up doing, because we had the benefit of being able to start the system from scratch, is that we built a system that was really much more like a private model, but had some of the safeguards and some of the benefits of the public model. What we did was, we did this system status management approach, and what that means is that we have a dynamic deployment model, which is ambulances stationed around the county at intersections where we know the calls are going to come from, right? And so they just sort of what they call bump and run. A call comes in, somebody's en route to the hospital, the other ambulance comes and covers that larger area in terms of response. That's opposed to, it's a very resource efficient model because it's really opposed to really the other model, which is the fixed post model. Fixed post model is kind of the fire model, which is they're posted at a fire station. You know, you got to do whatever. You got to, you know, slide down the pole. I don't know what else you do. You got to go out the ambulance. You got to start it up and go. This is you're able to do this system deployment with far fewer resources because you've got people that are in the truck on 8 or 12-hour shifts, and as you might imagine, this is not something that's easily done in a union environment. And I don't want to pick on unions here, but I had a really pleasurable meeting way back when we started to do this with paramedics that previously worked for the hospital. And they came in and they were represented by 10 or 20 of them came in at the time and wanted a meeting. And they said, hey, we understand this model you're cooking up. We're not working in this model. We work 24 on, 48 off, or 24 on, 72 off. We're never going to work in this model. We hired all of them. and with very few exceptions, the ones we didn't want, we didn't hire. But again, they all came. And again, if we were in a union environment or in a fire model, I can tell you, we would not have done that deal. It wouldn't have been possible. Prior to this, as crazy as it sounds, the hospital had these folks in hotel rooms across the county. That was their fixed posts. I don't even want to tell you the problems that were, or opportunities, depending on how you look at it, that were involved in the hospital fixed post or the hotel room fixed post model. But yeah, there's some good stories there. Dispatch, obviously very important. I'm going to come back to that. Shoot times, again, just an industry term. The time it takes for the call to come in, for the ambulance to be dispatched, very critically important. In a system status management model, it's the time it takes to go from park to drive, right? So it's quick. Transport time, obviously the golden hour, we've all heard about that. Really, at the end of the day, the most important thing is to get that patient to the hospital, and that drop time, from the time you pick them up to the time they're at the hospital is really important. Now, they're doing stuff in the back of an ambulance today that they were doing in the emergency room, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. They're doing all kinds of really high-tech stuff. In fact, EMS hasn't even been around very long. In the 1970s, I'm looking around at some gray-haired folks in here. Yeah, you.
All of your hairdressers.
That's right. It was only in the 1970s in Florida that you had EMS service. prior to that, who was providing the service?
Come on.
Funeral homes. Funeral homes, and there was actually problems at the time because the funeral homes, the paying customers weren't the ones that were alive, you know what I mean? So they were on the scene, there were some problems there, the paying customers they wanted to take, and the guys that, you know, survived weren't as high on the priority. So hence EMS. Alan, we'll talk about the business of EMS, this is important.
Yeah, and let's jump into the money side again, because this is where it all happens, folks. It's an expensive operation, and the hospital was not doing a very good job. That's one of the main reasons we got the phone call and said, we're done. We can't afford to do this anymore. They didn't have a very efficient way of doing it, and they said we want out of it. So we've structured in Leon County to try to be about a 50-50 split. With the decline in property taxes or the values over the several years, it's actually shifted a little. When I talk about 50-50, we're talking billing, direct billing to the patient, to the insurance company, versus what you're subsidizing it with property taxes. Our ratio is a little more like 60-40 right now with the decline in values, and the board has kind of capped the millage rate right now, but the fees have kept up with the need for the service. Don't be looking to the state for a lot of funding, as you know. You're probably not getting a lot from the now for anything. But right now, on average, you might be talking about $100,000 a year at best you're going to get for help you with some grants. And we're talking in Leon County about a $15 to $16 million operation to run our program. When you go to billing, a lot of different options out there. You can go with the private sector and hire a billing company to manage it for you, which we do in Leon County. Pinellas County elected to do it in-house, and they have a very efficient operation of doing it. For us, it costs about 4.25% of billings, and we pay $11 per Medicaid claim. We also do balance bill our patients. If our cost for a run is, say, $900 and the insurance company's $500, we go to the patient for the other $400. We don't negotiate with the insurance companies to say, if you pay $500, we won't charge. No, it's a full bill. That's the cost of the operation, period. So that brings you to, of course, the big question as a county, and our board elected to do it, a collections policy. Do you want to be going after your constituents to pay their bills? You know, we do it for property taxes. You're just not directly dealing with it every day, but this is a bill and a service. So we have a collections policy, absolutely the last resort, and we'll put people on a billing schedule. You want to pay us $5 a month for 20 years, but we don't write this stuff off until we've exhausted every option.
Again, big political decision.
Yes.
Do you as a county commission want to be turning folks into the credit bureau, which
Right.
is the business that you will be in, and you got to go into it eyes wide open on these things. And of course, has it meant anything to us at the county? Have we gotten any blowback from it, that sort of thing? No, but it is a political consideration. We realize that, and an important one. Another thing to keep in mind, Al, I just want to mention,
Yeah.
it wasn't on the script, but your payer mix
Right.
is really important. That's one of those things, and payer mix means the amount of people insured in your community. That's a big factor in deciding whether or not you want any part of this.
Right. And we're lucky. We're a highly insured
yes.
community. Leon County, with the state government and the universities, we're very insured. So we knew going in, we would probably not do so bad. The hospital wasn't as focused on it, and the hospital wasn't doing balanced billing and had relationships. We were very straight up going in, and we set it up knowing that we'd probably do a little better than the hospital did in collections.
Also, I know you're used to hearing the opposite version of this story, but the hospital, which is a very good hospital,
Oh, yeah.
very sophisticated regional hospital in Tallahassee, they were losing $1.6 million a year on the air ambulance service.
That's a great example.
We took it, restructured the contract, put it out for bid, and we're losing how much? Zero. Because a big medical provider out of Colorado actually came in and provided that service based on their own billings. So again, another important distinction.
Yeah, because the hospital was doing it themselves and they hired on their employees, and we said no. So, one quick question here. How many of you here as elected officials like to vote and raise fees every year?
He does.
Nobody?
Okay.
Nobody? I thought I saw
Citrus
one.
County does.
Citrus, we like
Yeah,
that? No?
Citrus does.
All right, it's okay. You guys can be a little quiet about that.
Scott
So-
Adams, man, he makes the motion every
Well,
time.
every
He says, I want to
raise fees. We predict
taxes."
you guys want to do that. So we're assuming you don't want to raise fees. So something Vince and I are proud of, because
Is that bad?
No, it's good. We like it.
So as a best practice, what we recommend to the board, and they did when we set up the program, because this is a medical-driven profession, the expenses are going up every year. So we put in place a fee resolution with the board, obviously voted on and approved. Initially, when we set it up, set the rate at X. But per the resolution, those fees go up by medical inflation each year.
Automatically.
So automatically. So we know there's expenses are going up, there's a revenue stream that's going with it. Because if you don't do that, you're going to be voting on a fee increase every year. So we think this is an extremely important best practice, and it's helped keep our EMS system state-of-the-art and properly funded. Like any business, you have employee issues, and in this one, they're a little unique. It's a very young workforce, a very transient workforce. It's a stepping stone. A lot of our men and women want to go in to be nurses, physician assistants, or even doctors. So they're coming in and they're moving through quickly, and we're hiring a whole new slug of people as you go. You're going to need relationships in the community. If you have hospitals, we have a lot of PRNs, and that's a Latin term for a part-time employee in the medical world. But we pick up a lot of people to backfill our employees that work in the hospitals at night, work in surrounding counties. So we have a very robust mix of our employee base to keep it properly staffed. It's an incredibly physically and mentally demanding profession, and it has, as you can see up there, one of the highest occupational injury rates of any profession, more than double the national average for any other occupation. So you need to know that going in, that you're properly covered, you have your proper insurance, your proper workers' comp, everything should be up to snuff.
Have we talked you into it yet?
Yeah.
Okay, just in case.
But we thoroughly love it. Our guys and
Yeah.
ladies, we have some of the best people in it as a premier service, and we're very proud of it. But they are exposed to a lot of things you don't do right now. There is some disproportionate amount of drugs and DUIs and other things. They have access to some very potent drugs, and they may have habits that form from that. Vince and I went through a very bad experience recently. We won't get into the details. It was a very public issue with a number of our employees with some bad drug issues, and the administrator dealt with it very quickly and very directly, but it was an eye-opening experience for all of us how prevalent it can be. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on unions. You may have them or not. They're a reality. You need to know what your contract says. You need to deal with them professionally. We're not saying they're good, bad, or indifferent, but ultimately since we started the program, we've had 2 different union votes. The last one was just last year, and it failed by 70%. We have a great working relationship with our team. That's what we consider it's a team. So the vote twice now, the union failed in Leon County. And part of the reason is we do things like this. This is a best practice. We've created a professional development career path. And what this does, this gives these guys and girls an opportunity to have growth within the profession. It gives them clear goals. It gives us the opportunity to retain employees. They want opportunities to grow. And if you look at the next slide right here, we've given them a glide path basically from being an EMT to the chief. Prior to this program, we based this on FEMA's best practice model for national public safety officials. We used to have an EMT and a paramedic, and that was it. You had nowhere really to move. So what we created was EMT 2, paramedic 1, paramedic 2, with charge paramedic, and all these have different training, experience, and these men and women who are passionate about the profession want the opportunity to train more, want the opportunity to learn more, and then we reward them for it. They get more money, they get a promotion, so it's an opportunity to keep some people maybe in the profession a little longer than they might once other have been. Another best practice is, and it seems so obvious, but most often the first person on the scene of an accident where somebody needs medical treatment is not going to be us. And it's probably not going to be law enforcement, it's going to be a citizen in your community. And we've taken an opportunity to really move forward in training our community in CPR. We have an event, you can see a little bit of a glimpse of it there. We call it Press the Chest annually. This last year we trained over 800 citizens at one event. We got a grant annually to do it. Everybody walks home with that little doll the guy's pushing. Everybody walks out of there with one of those, and we teach them. We also have AEDs, automatic electronic defibrillators, throughout the community. But more importantly, we have them pinpointed and they're in our 911 system. So if somebody goes down somewhere, we will know if there's an AED somewhere in that building, and we can tell the caller, there's an AED on the 3rd floor, go run and get it and bring it back, and we'll walk you through how to use it.
Every public building, we've got them in every law enforcement car, we've got them in every police, fire. So again, but the prevalence of that, now hold on to your seats, you want to hear a statistic.
Oh yeah, there you go.
The national average for a successive intervention to a cardiac arrest is 7%. That means when somebody calls 911 and someone's having a heart attack, the success rate for spontaneous return of circulation is 7%. In Leon County, the number is
30%.
30%, yeah, about 31%. And we track that really closely because that's really important, obviously. Fire services, talking about something else that'll give you a heart attack, paying for fire services. I'm going to hit this real quick because, again, I want to make sure that we have some time to talk. But fire services is big. Again, we're authorized, not mandated. A lot of different ways to provide for fire services, a lot of different ways to fund it. General revenue, obviously, people have MSTUs in place, people have fire services fees in place. Quick show of hands, who has a fire services fee in place. Oh, Commissioner
Maddox.
We
Yeah.
love that.
Wait, front row here.
Front row, fire services fee in place, yeah. And there's actually just a recent authorization for a sales tax. I really like this idea, but it's a sales tax to fund fire services, just recently authorized. Nobody's doing it yet. Again, looking into the crystal ball, if you're a great prognosticator, right? I'll bet you $1 in 20 years, this is how everybody's funding fire. But because it's so arduous to fund it on these fees, fire services fees, it's very costly to do it out of general fund. It's very hard to do it from MSTUs, and the costs are exorbitant, obviously. This surtax gives you the ability to levy up to 1 cent for the purposes of funding fire. Generally speaking, because we looked at it, it gives you, population-wise, about how much fire costs to provide in your community. 1 penny in Leon County generates $40 million. 1 penny, and what is the fire budget right now?
38, 39 million.
Yeah, I mean, so it works out from that respect. Again, it's one of those things that if you're a county commissioner and we are not, in our world, we are not politically tone deaf, we know it's hard to fund this thing. And especially when we bring our fire services fees every year, when they go up every year and that sort of thing. And so it's one of those sales taxes, again, the way to look at it is you put it in place, you generally don't hear about it again. Scott?
This question I have, I guess, is that MSBU, we can't use for ALS, so we have to generate an MSTU. Will the sales tax be able to be used for ALS and the whole 9 yards?
Nobody's tested it yet.
Okay, there we go.
We had the same
will.
issue. We have the same issue in reading language. It's not abundantly clear.
Okay.
But you could put it in place to fund the fire portion, and
Right.
then obviously
Yes, that's kind of what we do.
shrink dramatically down your MST to fund the.
There's also a special district tax.
Yes, yeah, and lots of people are doing special districts.
Yep.
Yeah, we should add that up there, yeah, because lots, I mean, very prevalent to have special districts in Florida doing that.
Is the cap the same when you start talking about sales tax, though? Do you have to reduce your local option sales tax?
No,
for
it's-
or could
this one's
be
actually different.
In addition to?
It's in addition to.
You're allowed to have your 2 local plus this one. It's one of the exemptions.
Yes.
It's
You-
capped at 1 cent?
Yeah, it's capped at 1 cent. So if Leon County put in place, we'd be at 8.5.
Really, we'd like to do this, so if you guys would do it first.
Yeah.
We really appreciate it.
We were hoping it was the other way around.
But it is voter approved.
Voter approved.
Voter
So
approved.
again, fire, very, very expensive. And again, fire has changed. I don't want to offend any firemen or former firemen, fire personnel that may be in the room. But again, we're up to 75, 80, 85% medical calls now. There's a saying in the fire world, which is that there's no future in fire. Because building codes and advanced suppression, fire ain't what it used to be. But one thing is, it's the structure that we use to fight fire, right? And it's very costly.
Did you say it is voter approved or it has to be?
Oh, the sales tax has to be voted on. Yeah. But again, now we're looking at a model where we've got, pumper tankers and engine companies going to fender benders. You know what I mean? It's not an efficient use. None of us would do this in the, I hate to say it again, but in the private sector, this is not something we would do. So it's really causing people to look at the model. But again, like so much of the other stuff we do, it's more about the way we've always done. And it's more about, again, the fire unions and some other things that are in place. But again, we've got, about 80, north of 80% a lot of times that these are medical calls. And again, and I can tell you for the price that I pay for fire, and I contracted with the city, I could put, I could have an ambulance in every driveway. It's one of those things. So it's caused quite a bit of, next slide please, it's caused a lot of people to sort of take a look at it. And when I was negotiating most recently our fire contract with the city of Tallahassee, Alan and I would send them over headlines every day that said, you gotta change your structure here. This is really excessively costly. And so nationally, you have much that's being written about that says this is not a sustainable model going into the future, not to mention what pensions are doing to providers. Pensions are really killing folks. I would tell you this Washington Post article, which just came out, is a really, really good one. So that's one that you might want to take a look at as well. Moving on very quickly, CD dispatch, just want to hit that quick. Again, dispatch is critical. None of this other stuff even matters if you can't get it right at the dispatch point. And that doesn't matter if you've got 2 people in the sheriff's office doing dispatch, or if you got a $50 million joint dispatch center like we do in Leon County. This best practice we've identified is that if you can do it, and this was something that was talked about for 20 and 30 years in Leon County, which was to have fire, police, sheriff, and EMS all in the same place, sitting next to each other, answering medical calls, so that instantaneously you can send the closest, most appropriate unit to the scene, not 3 fire engines, 2 police cars, 6 ambulances, and 4 sheriff's deputies, right? The closest, most appropriate unit to the scene. And this consolidated environment allows you to do that. But training is key. I can't tell you. I can't stress that enough. It is a very technical CDA. If you go back one, Andy, it's a very technical profession. I've had cases recently where somebody just put keystroking 1 digit difference. They had to put in 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 2, and they put in 3 at the end. And again, we're all so dependent on technology now that it sends it to the wrong address, or it codes a call wrong, or somebody uses the wrong call sign on a call, which is just like the other one that they should have. So training in the area of dispatch. Moving on, and I'm going to hit this super quick, but if you're going to spend any time as a county commissioner, I know you all are, emergency management is synonymous with hurricanes in Florida, and you'll probably spend a lot of time in the EOC before it's all over. I know some of you probably already have. Chapter 252, again, vests the responsibilities and powers of emergency management with the county commission. A couple of tools to help mitigate your exposure and to help facilitate the best emergency response. Your CEMP, you all have them. Your comprehensive emergency management plan, check in with your emergency manager on it. This is not, and I won't tell you to read very much, this is one that's actually worth you sitting down, as intimidating as it might look, and going through it. It'll tell you where your resources are, what happens during the situation, who's deployed, what's on, what shuts down, where staging areas are, all of that, and it's required. And just make sure, again, not bad to ask the emergency management director, I'd like to see a copy of the CEMP. Don't tell him I told you to do that, because he might have a heart attack. Okay? The NIMS, National Incident Management Training. Show of hands, anybody going through NIMS in here?
Come on.
It's it's a standardized training that you go through now that was developed after 9/11 to have consistent protocols in place no matter what the incident. So NIMS training, no matter what the incident, who does what, when they do it, how they do it. It's a national model, it's a best practice. Coordination with FEMA, obviously can't say enough about that. Next slide. A couple of best practices. Just wanted to, again, sort of leave you with something. This is something, we do this, a hurricane survival guide, and the county government does it. It's very, very comprehensive, it's very intuitive. If you flip through the pages, it says, it's got like a roadmap, and it tells people stay or go based on the boxes they check and where they are. It's really intuitive. Our newspaper distributes this for us to 170,000 subscribers. Again, so it's a really, really important tool, and it encourages people making a plan, obviously, which is very important. I know we've all heard that. Next slide, please. Another thing is you all have websites, I'm sure. It's not a difficult job to have to be able to flip the switch and go to an emergency portal. All of that takes over your website. It's another best practice that we identify. It's called an information or an emergency information portal. We turn it on anytime there's an event, and it helps people, again, to get the information they need quick. What what shelters are open, what roads are closed, and it's really important to have it work with mobile devices, the way people use information now. So that's a biggie. Next one, what do we have? Oh, just in the EOC, when the EOC is activated, really critically important training. We've got lots of volunteers that train all year round together. Obviously, having all the people in the same room is really important as well. And so, training in your EOC. Next slide, please. Things that you don't just automatically necessarily think about, but have contracts in place early on before the event regarding things like debris removal. You want to negotiate those contracts, have them in place, that when things happen, you're ready to roll. Mutual aid agreements, obviously, other interlocal agreements, and other vendor contracts, really important, because these folks are going to be, we've all seen it in Florida, when the hurricane hits, you may not be as affected as the guy next door, and all the bucket trucks all of a sudden are going next door. And you want to have those mutual aid agreements, but you want to be able to take care of your folks. So have these contracts in place that ensures that you got vendors that are responsive to you. So again, whether it's debris management or whatever, it is really important. Next slide. Oh. Yeah, this is the point we wanted to get to, folks. So anything that we talked about, we know we talked about a lot, overwhelming, but that's the area of public safety, and given all the things that you all are responsible for and that we work with you with, and so we're happy to answer any questions that you might have, Commissioner.
Recently, our fire guys came at us with a thing. They said they couldn't get the best deal on drugs going through the purchasing policy for the EMS. Is there anybody's got a fix for that? We were thinking maybe a third-party vendor just to buy drugs at the best cost.
What was their concern?
If we bid the drug contract out at the beginning of the year, we can't always get the best price of the drugs because they fluctuate so much. So therefore, they were asking for a waiver on the purchasing policy. Is that pretty standard, or is it?
I had not heard that before.
For that?
Alan, make something up.
I could make something up.
How long have you been working with the county here, man? Yeah, we'll look into that. I've never come across it. Yeah.
No, I mean, no, because we've not, I mean, we've been running
As
EMS.
staff, that pains us to say that.
No, because we've been running for 15 years and
Yeah.
we've never had an issue with price issues with our drugs. That's why it's surprising. That's a very unique concern.
Two quick ones. One, the salary study that you said, or your sheriff, that you can justify. Do you base it off of population, crime rates? How do you define what the measurable income is? Because we had, like Rodney and earlier was saying, if you base it off of a certain number of deputies based on their per capita,
See, that-
that goes up, your price goes up. Instead of you base it on crime rates, like for St. Lawrence County, for example, we're growing, but the older demographic that we have coming into our area might not be as dangerous a demographic, so just having population increase doesn't necessarily translate to higher crime rates or the necessity of additional officers. So how do you determine what your budget allocation is based on?
I think it goes back to the best practice, and I know it's going to be corny. It really comes back to that relationship. We don't, and this may sound odd, have an allocation for our sheriff's office. We work with our sheriff to develop what they think is the budget they need. And our sheriff office for the last, I've been at the county for 15 years, they've never brought a budget in outside of the percentage, just an aggregate that we'd be allowing. When we were reducing our budget for all the downturns, when we were cutting our budgets by 3, 4, 5% a year, the sheriff participated. And when he came back this year and said, here's my, basically we do an incremental base budget. So he has his base budget, which is what he said he needs to fund. And then he comes and says, he hasn't asked for a position probably in 3 or 4 years. So this year when he came, he said, the most important thing to me next year is getting the salaries right for the employees I have. Will you work with me in establishing, so the board, they went to the board early on in the budget cycle, early in January, and said, we want to give raises to our deputies. Do you think that's a good thing? And they said, yes. Work with our staff and develop the right amount of money. So we had his base budget from his previous year, which was basically only inflationary increases, and then we developed an incremental cost for those deputies. And that was it. He didn't ask for any new positions. He didn't ask for anything else.
But at the same time, really
Right.
important to know that we're not saying, again, that just happens, that there shouldn't be any expectation that your sheriff is just going to do that.
Oh, God, no.
What that requires is
Oh.
Alan,
Oh.
myself, sitting with the sheriff and his CFO.
Yeah.
down for
Oh,
hours and
That's the
hours
right
and
level, I
days.
guess
Yeah.
would have been the right question. How do you know that the level that you ultimately end up at is the correct level that can be defended? You know, how do you know that you were starting at the right base? Let's say you were taking over for you two.
right?
And you were new coming in, you sat down with the sheriff for the first time. How do you know that they're at the right funding level to start with?
Well, for example, let's look at the jail. We've done benchmarking examples on that jail and the cost per inmate, how he cuts, much it takes the cost to run our jail versus other jails around the state. So you can look at an inmate ratio to your jail very easily. That's easy. You can go look at comparable size counties, comparable size jails, and determine, is your inmate ratio to the cost of running your jail consistent with everybody else? So we've always looked at that, and with the board probably 4 or 5 years ago did a check-in with us and said, hey, cost to run the jail, is this the right way? Should we be doing this or not? So our budget office went, benchmarked all the other jails and determined that. On the law enforcement side, it becomes very tricky because it just depends the level in which your sheriff is doing it. So if you look at Pinellas County, it gets a little more challenging. They're contracting with half the cities there to provide law enforcement. So you can't really go in and say, because you don't know what the level of service that city might want. So when you start benchmarking your law enforcement, it's not as straightforward because everybody's doing it a little differently. You know, you may have in our community, our sheriff may not be doing as much roll patrolling inside of the city limits. In other jurisdictions, the city might have pulled back a little, the sheriff might be doing more. So it's not going to be as an apples to apples comparison. So some of those ratios, though they sound nice on paper, when you dig into them, and they not give you exactly what you want. But that jail, it's a real straightforward exercise.
When they came to us to do the fee study, they said, look, we gotta be competitive, we gotta fill these positions.
Mhm.
But at the same time, we've got, 27 officers retiring. We're not
Right.
gonna fill those positions if we can have our existing people get the salary back. And that's a negotiation.
Right.
And we sit down with them and say, okay, if you're not gonna fill 27 deputy spots, we're gonna go ahead and do this fee study. And then we hold them to the fire in the next years to make sure, hey, all right, then they'll come back to us and say, now it's not, they're coming in, +1 or +2 at their historical level of staffing. Now they're coming in and saying, now we'd like to add one after we cut the 27, you know what I mean? And so that's that working relationship that you have to have.
And another thing you want to have your sheriff do, because there's a lot of discretion in purchasing when it comes to a sheriff's office. And we've been very lucky again, when it comes to your food service, your medical, in these areas, bid it. I mean, if you get your sheriff to make sure they bid their medical and their food service contracts, it will keep the prices very competitive because they can just dole out those contracts. I mean, their rules are a little different than your rules under statute. So our sheriff, again, trying to be fiscally prudent, will bid out these services regularly and make sure
And
they're doing the best.
And sometimes in counties, not any of the counties represented in this room, but in other counties, their sheriff really likes doling out those contracts.
Yeah.
First of all, I want to say, for us, this is outstanding. Citrus County right now is in the process, Commissioner Carnahan is chairing a committee with the sheriff and everybody else, that we're looking at fire, EMS, the whole thing, what we're doing, how we're changing it. I had two things that came up that I'm curious about. One is, you mentioned the 1 cent allocation. According to the numbers we were given yesterday, right now what happened in Citrus County is we basically, last year, had to double the fire tax for a tax assessment or MSBU, which the citizens were not very happy about, and probably we have our jobs today due to that. So what we've been tasked with is how do you fund fire? So the 1% allocation, or 1% sales and tax for Citrus County would be about $11 million, which is about what it takes to operate.
Yeah.
So you mentioned it's very close to the same. So do you find a consistency that it's roughly about 1% of what? I mean, I find it interesting that you came up with the same almost.
It's interesting. We were talking to Monroe County yesterday. In Monroe, it's totally different. Monroe, they're looking at possibility the same thing as sales tax. Their number, because they're a high tourism county, they would generate probably $15 million more than the sale tax is needed to run the fire.
But here's my other point,
Yeah.
too, and this I'm really going to be curious about. To have an MSTU and MSBU, you have to pay property appraiser and the tax collector a fee to collect that
Mhm.
money, right?
Right.
So what we're collecting, we're paying almost $900,000 a year to these constitutionals to collect it.
Yeah.
That would not be required out of the 1%.
Correct. The state would take their share. They would take the state would take their small administrative commission, and that's it.
So that's usually a potential.
Oh, it's a huge pickup. Yeah, we pay about $1 million a year to collect all our
And
revenue.
again, remember, depending on your tourism population and how
Right.
much that generates, and it's up to 1 cent. So again, to cover the cost of fire, you may only have to go a half cent, you may have to go 3/4 of a cent, but that's scalable, and you can do that with it. In Monroe County, they're talking about doing it for a cent, because they have 67% of it paid by visitors.
Right.
So anything that's the sales tax passes there, because the people that live there know the benefit of it. So again, they're talking about trying to maybe use the proceeds and take care of some of their human services
Right.
needs.
They're gonna try to get a change to the state law.
Yeah, they're going after a statute
I
fix.
hope Commissioner Carnahan puts your phone numbers on his speed dial.
And I'll try to get my dad to stop burning in the barrel back there.
I have two questions. Could you walk me through the process of the sheriff, with his budget to you, to the county commissioner? Does it go to the county commission, line by line? Could you walk me through your
Sure,
process
sure.
there? And my other question
Yeah.
is, you didn't mention anything in your jail about pretrial release.
Mhm.
You got a different name, or you just?
We do. We use pretrial release, yes, we do that, and it's a big, in our world too. Well, let me tell you, Al and I'll tag team on this real quick, but I'll give you the most concise answer. I remember the days, I've been at the county, been 21 years now, but I remember the days when the sheriff used to come in and sit down at the table, and we'd go line by line, and it was horrible, it was terrible, and it was all the political theatrics of how much for public safety do you, and how much do you pay for this, that, it was a terrible, terrible relationship that we had. Again, it can start tomorrow for any of you all. Alan said something really important here, which was, generally speaking, you all have much more administrative, generally speaking, counties have much more administrative capacity than sheriffs. Sheriffs tend not to be, again, people who manage multi-million-dollar operations. They're very good at what they do, but they tend to not have that administrative capacity as a rule. You tend to, and again, it's all scalable, but they've got to see the benefit of working with you through the budgetary process. And again, that starts with sitting down and saying, you know what, after a really bad budget hearing between it, is to say, Sheriff, how'd that work out for you? You know what I mean? Well, that wasn't a lot of fun. There's got to be a better way that we can do this. Let's get our people together. Let's start working tomorrow on this. Let's start holding hands. And it really is just a matter of building trust over a long period of time. Today, I mean, I hate to say it, they call us and say, again, because I'm not rubbing it in because I know the relationship isn't like this. They'll call us up at the end of the year and say, hey, we're returning $9 million, that we're not spending this year. You know what I mean? And that's because they know that we're going to take care of them when it comes down to salary studies or doing something with benefits or doing something with our health care and that sort of thing. But it's a trust relationship, and again, it doesn't just happen.
Right, and at a real raw level, we work with, it starts at the staff level, so they follow our budget process very closely. When the administrator sets out his guidelines for the budget, for the staffs to develop the budgets, we share that with the sheriff's office. We have
I think that's where we were
right. We have an
Yeah.
I don't get that part, because I don't know if that's happening with us.
right. Yeah, we
We
have
get the shopper, I need $6 million.
Sure.
right.
But what we do, like early on, generally around February, May, you guys usually, depending on your county, your county administrator will come to you, and probably on your agenda is, here's the budget calendar, right? This is what it's gonna look like for the next 6, 7, here's when we're gonna have workshops, here's when we're gonna do this, here's when we're gonna do that. The same thing we send to the sheriff and say, Sheriff, here's our budget calendar. Here's when we're receiving submissions, here's when we're doing this, here's when we're having conversations at the administrative level, here's when we're putting together the final budget, and they go along with us. But it has a lot to do with structure, because absent that, you're right, you get the $6 million problem, in June, in July, you know what I mean, when it's coming down in crunch time.
No, we know what's coming for them before they submit it.
So your commissioners see this ahead of time, or they see it in jail?
Well, generally, we work it, and what they see is, what they see is their final submission.
Right.
Which we're able to then come to the county commission and say, commissioners, we work with them throughout the process, here's their budget, it's justifiable, we recommend it, we can stand behind it, and it represents X increase or Y decrease. Or this may be the year we're changing out cars, or this
What's
may
this?
be the year we're.
What's this mean, Shankton?
Doing lots of things. Okay, any more questions? Questions?
Well, no, I think we're being directed to.
To wrap it up? All right. We'll take it to one more. She was very good.
Is that an either or? You can't have one cent and the assessment.
No, you can only have the sales tax. The sales tax under state law requires, and this is very unique the way the statute's written, where the board has an awful lot of discretion. If that sales tax gets passed the way the law is written, everybody, you have to proportionally give out the money to the local jurisdictions that have fire departments based on prior year budgets. There's a percentage calculation, but they have to correspondingly eliminate any of their assessments or fees used to fund fire.
Let me say that again.
Yes, it's a very unique.
That's really big. We almost didn't believe when we were.
We read the statute.
So you're an accountant, you've got 14 little cities.
Right.
If you put that in place, all of those 14 cities must repeal their fire taxes.
Right, and you got to give them the money, but you have to share the money with them.
Pay for
Yeah,
it.
right. You have to share the sales tax with them under a formula. They can't keep funding it on the other one.
So they're, like our city funds it out of their general fund.
Right.
So then they would have to eliminate funding from general fund.
Absolutely. That's where the law reads right now. It's pretty straightforward.
And then you can say, not only did I reduce taxes in my county.
I reduced-
it in all the
cities
cities.
is-
that are- Something, we'll come up with something. Yeah.
You don't want us to keep going? You think that was enough?
I
We'd
would
like to
love
keep going, if
but,
you don't mind.
You know, I have an agenda, and when I
Yeah.
type it out and it's color coded, I can't do that.
Well,
So-
we'll be back in January, right? You want us again for the budget one?
No, that's too. But this is not the end of the Leon County show.
Okay.
I need you guys, so we
Alright.
may just have to do like the Vince Allen entire comedy duo
Yeah.
thing. So with that, I do want to thank Vince and Allen for a great presentation and the entire Leon County